We're going to be in the Hudson. Those 6 words shocked everyone listening that afternoon. Air traffic controllers fell silent. Passengers had no idea what was happening inside the cockpit. In just 208 seconds, one pilot would make a decision that aviation experts would study for decades. This isn't the story of a perfect flight. It's the story of 4 minutes that changed aviation history forever. January 15th, 2009. It was supposed to be just another afternoon flight. US Airways, Flight 1549, departed New York's LaGuardia Airport, carrying 150 passengers and 5 crew members. Business travelers, families, tourists, all expecting to arrive in Charlotte just a couple of hours later. No one on board knew that within minutes, every life inside that aircraft would depend on a decision no pilot ever wants to make. At exactly 3:24 p.m., Flight 1549 lifted off from runway 4 at LaGuardia Airport. At the controls sat Captain Chesley "Sully" Sullenberger, a pilot with nearly 40 years of flying experience and over 19,000 flight hours. Beside him was First Officer Jeff Skiles, who had only recently completed training on the Airbus A320. The climb was smooth. Weather conditions were clear. From the cockpit, it looked like another routine departure. There was nothing to suggest that in less than 2 minutes, everything would change. Then, at approximately 2,800 feet, disaster struck. A flock of Canada geese slammed directly into the aircraft. The impacts were violent. Within seconds, both engines lost thrust. Passengers later described hearing what sounded like explosions beneath the wings. Inside the cockpit, warning alarms erupted as the engines began shutting down. A modern airliner had suddenly become a powerless glider above one of the most crowded cities in the world. From that moment, Captain Sully had just 208 seconds to save every person on board. For pilots, losing one engine is an emergency. Losing both is almost unheard of. Inside the cockpit, Captain Sully and First Officer Jeff Skiles had no checklist for a situation like this at such a low altitude. The Airbus was no longer climbing. It was descending fast. Every second that passed meant fewer options. Every decision had to be made immediately, and it had to be right. Air traffic control immediately offered Captain Sully 2 choices: return to LaGuardia or divert to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. On paper, both sounded possible. But Sully wasn't looking at paper. He was looking through the cockpit windshield, watching the aircraft lose altitude with every passing second. Years later, computer simulations suggested the plane might have reached an airport, but only if the pilots reacted instantly with no delay. Real life isn't a simulation. Sully had already spent precious seconds assessing the damage. He knew attempting to reach a runway carried an enormous risk of crashing into homes, buildings, or crowded streets. Then came the decision that would define Captain Sully's career and save 155 lives. Looking ahead, he saw something no checklist had prepared him for. The widest, clearest path wasn't a runway, it was the Hudson River. Sully keyed the radio and calmly said the words that stunned everyone listening. "We're gonna be in the Hudson." There was no panic in his voice, no hesitation, just acceptance and complete focus. At that moment, the mission changed. This was no longer about reaching an airport. It was about giving everyone on board a chance to survive. Inside the cabin, something felt different. The engines had gone quiet. Passengers looked at each other, searching for answers no one could give. Some held the hands of complete strangers. Others quietly whispered prayers. Flight attendants began shouting commands, preparing everyone for an emergency landing. Meanwhile, Captain Sully focused on one thing: keeping the aircraft under control. Without engine power, there would be no second attempt, no go-around, he had one chance to land perfectly. If the aircraft struck the water at the wrong angle, it could break apart instantly. At 3:31 p.m., exactly 208 seconds after the bird strike, Flight 1549 touched the Hudson River. The impact was violent, but Captain Sully kept the wings level and the nose slightly raised, allowing the aircraft to skim across the surface instead of digging into it. Against extraordinary odds, the Airbus remained intact. A disaster that could have claimed 155 lives had become something almost impossible to believe. Everyone on board had survived the landing, but the danger wasn't over yet. Within minutes, freezing water began pouring into the cabin. Outside, the temperature hovered just above freezing, and the Hudson River was dangerously cold. Passengers climbed onto the wings, waiting for help as the aircraft slowly settled lower into the water. Then, something remarkable happened. Ferry captains, already operating nearby, immediately changed course and raced toward the aircraft. Along with police boats and emergency responders, they began pulling passengers to safety one by one. In less than half an hour, every person on board had been rescued alive. Most people would have rushed to safety. Captain Sully did the opposite. Before leaving the aircraft, he walked through the cabin twice, row by row, seat by seat, making absolutely certain that no passenger had been left behind. Only after confirming the cabin was empty did he step onto the wing and leave the aircraft himself. It was a quiet decision. Almost no one saw it happen, but for many people, it became the moment that truly defined his character. As news of the emergency landing spread around the world, one word appeared in almost every headline: miracle. But inside the National Transportation Safety Board, investigators weren't looking for miracles. They were looking for facts. Could Flight 1549 have made it back to LaGuardia? Could it have reached Teterboro Airport instead? Computer simulations were conducted to find out. At first, the results suggested the aircraft might have reached a runway, but there was one problem. The simulations assumed the pilots reacted instantly, without hesitation, without assessing the damage, without thinking. Real pilots don't have that luxury. When investigators added realistic human reaction time, the outcome changed completely. The aircraft could no longer reach either airport safely. Captain Sully's decision to land on the Hudson wasn't just reasonable, it was the safest option available. In the days that followed, Captain Sully became a national hero. But when reporters praised him for saving 155 lives, his response surprised many people. He insisted the outcome wasn't the work of one man. He credited First Officer Jeff Skiles, the flight attendants who kept passengers calm, the ferry crews who rushed into the freezing river, and the emergency responders waiting on shore. Even today, the aircraft rests in a museum, not as a reminder of disaster, but as proof of what preparation, teamwork, and calm decision-making can accomplish under unimaginable pressure. Most flights are forgotten the moment they end. Flight 1549 became unforgettable because one ordinary afternoon turned into 208 seconds that tested everything a pilot had spent a lifetime preparing for. Captain Sully didn't have superpowers. He didn't know the ending. He simply relied on years of training, experience, and the courage to make the hardest decision of his career. Sometimes, history isn't written by people who never face impossible situations. It's written by those who stay calm when everyone else believes there's no way out. 208 seconds, one decision, 155 lives. If this story reminded you how courage can change history, subscribe to DLY Takes for more true stories that deserve to be remembered.